Welcome to The Growth Spurt, a weekly AI podcast by the Second Baptist Church of Ann Arbor. Today, we're diving deep, into Reverend Marcia Bond's sermon,
Oh, yeah.
The Necessity to Do Better. And wow, this one really packs a punch.
I know, right?
So she starts off with this story, just grabs you right away.
Okay.
She's talking about meeting this guy, seemed totally normal, nice.
Yeah.
But then he drops his wallet and what falls out? A
What?
KKK membership card.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it makes you think, like how we can be so wrong about people.
It really does. Like, you think you know someone.
And then bam, this hidden side comes out.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, like, are we missing these signs all the time?
Right. But Reverend Bonds doesn't just stop there. She takes this personal story and connects it to something so much bigger.
Okay.
She's talking about the challenges Jesus faced in the Bible.
Okay.
And then she brings in Dr. King and the civil rights movement.
Wow, that's a big jump.
It is. But she makes this connection so well. Suddenly we're seeing this pattern of hypocrisy and these huge societal issues.
Oh, I see.
You got the Pharisees always watching Jesus, judging him.
Yeah.
Then you've got the racism Dr. King was fighting against.
Right.
And then her own experience with this guy and the KKK card. It's all linked together.
It all comes back to how we treat each other, right?
Exactly. And then she uses this phrase that just stuck with me. Free-range Christians running around as imposters.
Ooh, that's a powerful image.
Right. Makes you think about whether we're really living out our faith or just putting on a show.
It's about walking the walk, not just talking the talk.
Exactly. So then she gets into her first main point. Someone is always watching.
Okay.
She compares how the Pharisees were always watching Jesus to how our actions are constantly being observed, especially by kids.
Oh, that's so true. Kids are always watching.
You really are.
Yeah.
So we have to be mindful of what we're modeling for them.
Absolutely. Our actions speak louder than words.
And she really emphasizes that, especially for Christians.
Yeah.
If our words and our actions don't match up,
Right.
it can really damage our credibility.
Oh, for sure. People can see right through that.
It undermines the whole message we're trying to share.
Exactly. And it can push people away from the faith.
Then she moves into this section called Difference Made Legal.
Okay.
And she pulls this quote straight from Dr. King's letter from Birmingham jail.
Powerful stuff.
He wrote, "An unjust law is a code that a majority inflicts on a minority that is not binding on itself."
Wow. That's heavy.
I know, right?
Ew.
So she's connecting those Jim Crow laws
Yeah.
to the situation Jesus was in with the Pharisees.
I see. It's all about power dynamics, right?
It is. It's about how systems can be twisted to benefit those in power.
And to keep others down.
Exactly. And it makes you think, are there things we're doing today, maybe even in the church, that might be missing the mark when it comes to justice and compassion?
It's a good question to ask ourselves. Are we truly living up to our values?
Then she brings up the story of Jesus healing the man with the withered hand on the Sabbath.
Oh, yeah. I remember that one.
And she uses it to challenge the Pharisees and their rigid interpretation of the law.
They were so focused on the rules, they missed the point.
Right. And sometimes I think we can be guilty of the same thing.
It's easy to get caught up in the letter of the law and forget about the spirit of it.
Yeah. Sometimes we need to step back and ask ourselves, are we really following the spirit of the law, or are we just going through the motions?
That's a great point. It's not enough to just follow the rules. We have to understand the why behind them.
And make sure they're actually leading us towards justice and compassion.
Exactly. It's amazing how she starts with that KKK card story right off the bat.
Oh, it definitely makes you pay attention. Like, whoa, where is this going?
Right. And it really gets you thinking, like, are we blind to prejudice too?
Like, are we giving people a pass because we don't want to face it?
Exactly. It's easier to just assume everything's fine.
But then something like that happens and you're like, oh, wow, I was so wrong.
Right. And it makes you question, like, am I really an ally? Am I doing enough to fight injustice?
That's a tough question. But it's one we need to ask ourselves.
And I think that's what Reverend Bonds is getting at. She's pushing us to look closer. Challenge our own assumptions.
And to be willing to hold each other accountable, even when it's uncomfortable.
Especially when it's uncomfortable, because that's where the real work begins.
And it's not just about what we do as individuals. She brings in Jesus and Dr. King and how systems of power have always been used to keep people down.
Oh, yeah, that historical context is so important.
The Pharisees using religious law to control people.
And then segregation being written into law.
It's like injustice can hide behind respectability.
That quote from Dr. King's letter, "An unjust law is a code that a majority inflicts on a minority that is not binding on itself." Man, that hits hard.
It does. It's like he's saying the powerful can make rules that don't even apply to them.
And then they use those rules to control everyone else.
But it makes you wonder, are there systems like that today, even in the church?
That's the question, right? Are we upholding structures that are actually unjust?
We got to be willing to examine that, even if it's tough.
Absolutely. We can't just assume everything's fine because it's always been that way.
So going back to that idea of someone is always watching, it really changes how you think about being a Christian.
Oh, yeah. It's not just about knowing the right things to say, it's about living it out.
Because people are watching, and especially kids.
They pick up on everything.
So we got to make sure we're modeling the right behavior.
It's like that saying, actions speak louder than words.
And when it comes to faith, it's even more important. Because we're representing something bigger than ourselves.
If we're saying one thing and doing another, it just creates confusion and doubt.
Right, and it can push people away from the church.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we have a responsibility to live in a way that reflects our beliefs.
That's where stewardship comes in, right?
Oh, absolutely. Stewardship, it's about more than just money.
It's about everything we've been given.
Our time, our talents, our resources, our platform even.
It's about using all of that to make a positive impact on the world.
And to serve others.
And to do it in a way that honors God.
It's a big responsibility, but it's also a privilege.
Now, Reverend Bonds doesn't shy away from the fact that doing the right thing can be hard.
Yeah, sometimes it means taking risks, speaking up when it's unpopular.
That's her whole point with, we must do it anyway.
I love that part. It's like a call to action.
It is. It's about choosing courage over comfort.
She talks about Jesus healing on the Sabbath, even though he knew it would upset the Pharisees.
And Dr. King marching in Birmingham despite the threats.
They both knew the risks, but they did it anyway, because justice was more important than their own safety.
And that's what we're called to do too. To stand up for what's right, even when it's hard.
Even when we're afraid.
Even when we might face consequences.
Because that's what faith is all about. It's about trusting God, even when things are uncertain.
And knowing that he'll be with us every step of the way.
You know, after listening to that sermon, that image of Jesus being both angry and sad, it just stuck with me.
It's powerful, right? Like, you don't always think about Jesus feeling those things.
I mean, he was God, but he was also human, you know?
Yeah, and it shows us that even when we're fighting for what's right, it's okay to feel those complex emotions.
Like, it's not just about anger, it's about sadness, too. It's about caring enough to be upset about the injustice.
And Reverend Bonds connects this back to her point about doing it anyway. You know, even when it's hard.
Like, it's not about ignoring those emotions. It's about letting them fuel our actions.
Right. Like channeling that anger and sadness into something positive.
Into making a difference.
And, you know, it's interesting how she circles back to that story about the KKK card.
Oh, yeah.
It would have been easy to just condemn that guy, you know.
Oh, yeah. It's easy to just write people off when they do something like that.
But she reminds us that even people who hold hateful views are still human.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, we have to fight the sin but love the sinner.
It's a tough balance, right? But it's important.
It's about holding those two things in tension, the need for justice and belief that everyone is capable of redemption.
So what really stood out to me was her emphasis on intentionality. Like, it's not enough to just think about doing good.
Oh, no. We have to actually do it.
It's about taking action, making choices that align with our faith.
And examining our lives, you know, our habits, our daily routines.
Like, are we really living out what we believe? Or are we just going through the motions?
That's a good question. Are we being intentional about our actions?
And she doesn't let us get away with vague answers either.
Right. Like, it's not enough to just say, I'm a good person.
She wants specifics.
Mm-hmm.
Like, are we actively fighting for justice?
Are we showing mercy to those in need?
Are we walking humbly with God?
And it's about putting our faith into action.
And I love how she brings in that concept of stewardship.
Oh, yeah. Stewardship is about so much more than just money.
It's about recognizing that everything we have is a gift from God.
Our time, our talents, our resources, our platform, everything.
And we have a responsibility to use those gifts wisely.
To serve others, to make a difference in the world.
And to give back to God.
It's about living a life of purpose.
A life that reflects God's love.
And I think that's a message that everyone can relate to.
It's not just about being a good Christian. It's about being a good human being.
It's about leaving the world a better place than we found it.
Now, Reverend Bonds doesn't shy away from the fact that doing the right thing can be tough.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes it means facing opposition, speaking truth to power.
But she reminds us that we're not alone.
Right. We have God on our side. And we have each other.
We can support each other. Encourage each other, hold each other accountable.
And together we can make a difference.
So as you go about your week, we want you to think about this sermon.
What spoke to you?
Where is God calling you to do better?
What action can you take?
Even if it's small? Even if it's uncomfortable?
Because every little bit helps.
And remember, someone is always watching.
Let your actions reflect the love and justice you believe in.
Go in peace, be blessed, and may the joy of Jesus be yours. We'll see you next week.